The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops Live with Jill Reynolds. We are at the Branson Film Festival in Branson, Missouri. And joining me, I just ran into, is Lucas Miles. Welcome to the show, Lucas.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's a privilege to have you on the show. And Lucas, we do things a little bit different on these type of interviews. We really believe that when Jesus walked on the face of the earth, he loved to share parables, accounts, and stories for the purpose of transformation in other people's lives. So if you're willing, would you take us on a journey, as long as you have time for, back to your childhood and share with us the story of you growing up, some of the good things and the hardships that you might have had in life, burdens you might have faced, and how that led you, transformed you into the amazing man of God you've become today.
First off, I appreciate you having me on the show. You know, it's certainly, I think probably like most people, there's a lot of events that I can think of in my past that have kind of brought me to where I am. I had a great childhood. I really, there's probably, I feel very fortunate. Working in ministry, I've seen so many people with tremendous scars, and not to say that there was never a bad day, but my parents loved each other. They're still married. It was a great home. I was a middle child and, older brother and younger sister, and got involved very, young in probably a couple different areas. I came from a family that was, artistic, but yet also my dad's a financial planner, and so they had kind of that rational, logical side too. So we were kind of a balance of left brain, right brain. I got involved pretty young in theater, also got involved in writing, really both things that I'm kind of working in today. I don't do traditional theater, but working in film world. And so it was a lot of, kind of setting the stage for where I went, kind of literally and metaphorically, I suppose. And, also I think that as I got a little older, I had a very profound call into ministry. And about, by the time I was 15, 16 years old, I felt like the Lord told me I was going to be in ministry. And I didn't know what that meant. I just figured I'd be a youth pastor for the rest of my life or something. But the seeds were planted then for really the three things that I'm involved in the most now, which is, writing, speaking, ministering, and making films. And so, it's kind of advanced. I know that's not necessarily a deep dive, but it's at least, set the framework for, where God's taken me.
So with that then, Lucas, I too am a middle child. And so I know with the middle child, for me anyway, so you can tell me, even if I love the terminology, codependency and the looking good family. It all looks good, smells good, but there's always generational wounds that are there. So generally, the middle child becomes the scapegoat and the one that acts out. So were you ever the teenager or the college person who acted out, or were the scapegoat, or were you a responsible child? I mean, what role did you play?
I don't know if I'd say responsible, in the sense that I think that, but it's, God's call just at an early age of my life, it really spared me from a lot. And so my brother is 3 years older, my sister's 5 years younger. And, I think that as my brother was sort of pioneering as the elder, sibling, what that next thing was in my life, my parents had a lot of focus on, getting him ready for high school, getting him ready for college, and then so on. And I was able to fly under the radar a little bit. When you say you flew under the radar, my son shared with me later on that he says, Mom, whenever you and Leary would go out, you'd call me 10 minutes before you came home, and I was always able to tell my friends to leave, and you never knew when I was having beer parties. And I said, oh, honey, I said I loved you so much. I called you 10 minutes before I got home so I wouldn't shame you and embarrass you. I knew exactly what you were doing. I feel really fortunate. I mean, a lot of my friends got in a lot of trouble, and God really spared me. I never drank or did drugs or anything like that. And really felt kind of set apart in some ways, and just protected from that. And so it was a good upbringing. I certainly, now I got a few speeding tickets. We could talk about those. That might be a different story, but
so you're Tom Cruise. Yeah. I have the need for speed.
Yes, I suppose a little bit. So yeah, but it kind of it's all gotten me to where I am, which I'm very thankful for.
So fast forward, into your adulthood now. So into your adulthood, are you married, single?
Yeah, so I've been married for going on 21 years, no kids, and so just my wife and I, and
No animals?
we have a cat, yes, named
Cat.
Bruce.
And Bruce behaves well.
No, Bruce is terrible. Bruce is a terrible,
So you had to use your
demon-like
disciplines.
creature, you know. So yeah, he's got good days and bad days, but he's ornery.
So tell us a little bit. I saw on your website, because I didn't know who you were. I'm just being really honest.
I'll pray for you.
I had no idea who you were. But I was fascinated. Tell us the title of this new book that's out, because I was fascinated by that, because I've been traveling the last few months now with Clay Clark and General Flynn with the Reawakened Tour. And so I love the title of your book.
Yeah, so the book is called The Christian Left, How Liberal Thought Has Hijacked the Church. And it's really a deep dive into understanding how Christianity has been infiltrated by leftist ideology, and certainly not all aspects of the church, but we're seeing this in Christian universities. We're seeing this in a lot of denominational churches, and people expect the super left, super woke Episcopal church, to fly a rainbow flag above the building. Nobody gets, we look at it, we roll our eyes, but nobody gets overly worked up about that. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing major, groups like the Southern Baptist, Convention, or even mainline churches or some of our larger mega churches that are starting to exhibit a lot of these woke tendencies, and they're pushing this idea that Jesus was a socialist, or Jesus was woke. There was just a guy on Fox, I think it was the other day, who was talking about, worked in the Bush Cheney administration, and he was just espousing his Christian faith, and it was around Easter. And he said, was talking about how that if Jesus was alive today, he would be, accused of being a woke and a socialist and all these different things. And I think people are waking up to that. But I really wanted to provide a book to give people a framework to understand, our way back to biblical Christianity. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of reactions on both sides, the left and the right. But the book's been received very well. It was endorsed by Mike Huckabee. We have a cover endorsement from him, and it was the #1 bestseller last year, and it was actually the top Christian leadership book in the country this last year. So,
well, that's great. I'm glad you wrote that, because the one thing, I myself, my whole perspective of politics and what's going on in the world has just been like light bulbs going off, mm-hmm. like left and right. And the one that I think is really kind of dear to my heart, I'd love for you to, I don't know if it's in your book, is when the government started giving stimulus checks to churches. And, for me, I don't know how you feel, but I just felt that is just like a way for them to control what the churches do. Mm. And in my opinion, I don't know if you feel the same way, I just don't feel like the churches should accept that money, because then all of a sudden they're under their guidance versus God's guidance, in my opinion, when it's government funding. And maybe you have a different feeling about it.
Look, I work with a lot of churches, from all different backgrounds. I do a lot of consulting for churches on these issues, and I've seen both. There are when you have the federal government shuts down the entire world, the federal government needs to be responsible for the financial outtake of that. Now, I don't think they should ever shut down. I don't think any of that should happen. But I think that that puts us, that puts every employer in a pretty difficult spot. And so, I think that it's a complex issue, and I think that it's important for each church, and I'm a big fan of local elders making those decisions. I never will make a blanket statement that a church should or shouldn't do this. I think that local elders need to look at it and really pray through it and look at each situation, see if it's going to be right for them. I don't think that what I'm not seeing that, churches that did or didn't take money are automatically then, able to be controlled by the government,
or
from
woke.
that. No, I don't see a correlation with that.
Okay.
And so I think that, I'm certain, and again, a lot of those policies came on, it was Trump that put a lot of those things into place initially, mm-hmm. For churches. And so I think that, certainly it may or may not be a good decision. I'm a big fan of churches being debt-free when at all possible. And
well,
so I think
financial advisor in the family for
right.
sure.
Yes. Yeah. You saw that come through. So, but no, that's maybe probably all I should say on that.
Yeah. And then how about, this is another one I'd love to hear your opinion on, I know that there's been churches out there when this pandemic hit that started telling their congregations, if you really love your neighbors and your brothers and sisters, you'll get the vaccine to protect them. And to me, I felt like that was really control about them making money off of it.
Yeah.
And I just really, it just rubbed me completely
Yeah.
wrong. I don't know, again, if you have any opinions.
No, I have lots of opinions on that one. So, look, I mean, what we saw is that I think that certain influencers in the church were approached about trying to push this idea that that Jesus would get vaccinated, and I'm not somebody who, I'm fairly balanced in my approach and my comments on these things. I obviously, it's not hard to find that I'm a conservative in kind of my political world. But I think that it's important, again, that people make individual decisions about something like, say, a vaccine. I don't think the vaccine's a mark of the beast. I don't think it's anything like that. But, for me, it wasn't right. And I think for a lot of people, it wasn't right. And so I would take the approach that as Christians, we should never put people in a position where they should ever violate their conscience. And so when we saw the spiritual manipulation that was happening, trying to get people to violate their conscience, that was really concerning. And you had, from news commentators to major, kind of left-leaning, Christian figures were pushing this idea that, it doesn't, if you don't get vaccinated, then you're not loving somebody. And I think that, I've done some teaching and correlations on this before with like looking at meat sacrifice to idols in the Bible. And I think there's some correlations in terms of how you approach that. But, maybe that's something, I know I'm on stage here in a little bit, but maybe we can go into that another time.
Yeah, I know you got to run. Well, it's been a privilege to have you on the show, and I would love for you to come back on and tell us more, because you can definitely reach out to me and be on the show for a longer period of time.
I appreciate that.
But I really love meeting you, and I'll definitely get your book.
Awesome.
My husband's the avid reader, so we'll definitely get that.
Very cool.
All right. God
Very cool.
bless
Thanks
you.
for having
Thanks
me.
a lot for joining
I
us.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.